There are many ways to approach your experiences. Our speakers, vast as they have been in practice, in method, in discipline, in style, demonstrate this. There are many ways. I thank all of you for rigorously demonstrating yours. Tonight, we welcome our final speaker, one of our own community members. Christine Marie is a faculty member in media study, and I suspect many of you are familiar with her. What could be better than to end this series with an artist and educator who has, in a short amount of time, had a significant impact on the culture of our department. Despite not knowing each other, Christine and I both moved from the San Francisco Bay Area to Buffalo the same week. We arrived in late fall, just before a series of epic winter storms. And did I mention that we came from California, where it's sunny? Christine was not yet at UB, thus I got to know this wonderful artist from my home state before we were also colleagues. As you will see, Christine is an esteemed artist. Her work will speak for itself. What I would like to emphasize are her efforts to expand learning paradigms with her students. Last week, I saw the work that her students were making during the Center for the Arts event, Spring into Art. I walked into a room of projectors and light shrewdly positioned around the space and thought, this right here is what it means to be a student of media study, experimenting and expanding on what media can be. The spatial discourse, the audio-visual discourse, all resolving into a singular discourse of bodies and ideas moving amidst the light and dark. Christine Marie is an interdisciplinary media artist whose work reflects upon industrialization, oppositional forces, and the media's gaze. Within sensory narratives, her work, Antiquated Augmented Reality, was presented at the Sundance Film Festival, New Frontier, featuring live, large-scale 3D stereo images created by her reinvention of the shadow stereoscope. She holds an MFA in Integrated Media and Experimental Theater from California Institute of the Arts. Marie was awarded the Andrew Mellon Artist and Technology Professor of Practice Grant. She has taught animation at Pixar and DreamWorks Studios. She currently teaches in the Department of Media Study at the University at Buffalo. Please welcome Christine Marie.
Hello, everybody. So happy to be the last artist of the Plasma series. Thank you, Dr. Vargas. What a nice remembering of the times that we got to Buffalo, and it's really nice to share our new experiences here together. It's unique. And today I wanted to just start with a moment because for me, maybe it's the elephant in the room. Currently, college campuses are experiencing a lot of strife. And I'm grateful that all of us are safe right now. And our own campus has had evacuations during the week. And it's really, oh. So I have a prayer for peace that I just want to share from Thich Nhat Hanh. He's a Zen Buddhist priest, and I kind of changed the words for myself, and it's something that helps me to read, to ground myself when times are turbulent like this. Okay. again, I'm surprised I get so choked up. May I be determined to cultivate thoughts and actions that increase trust and love, to use my hands to perform deeds that build community, to speak words of harmony and aid. May the merit of this prayer be transformed into peace on our campus and throughout the world. May we realize this as our deep aspiration. Thank you. And in my presentation today, I've given a lot of talks and keynotes and all kinds of strange places where I'm invited to talk about creativity and the arts. But today I really wanted to talk to you as students and to sort of position myself where you are. I've never discussed some of these works that I made right when I was an undergrad and when I was in grad school. But a lot of my work from grad school is work that I still work on now. And this week I had the honor of sitting in for the graduate review and seeing kind of where a lot of young artists are at and the things that they're thinking about conceptually and how they're connecting it to their lives. So I want to share that with you, sort of where I was at, what I was thinking, and what I've made. So enantiodromia, I was surprised to find myself at like 20 using an ancient Greek term to conceptually be the container of my first visual experiment in the arts. But I was noticing all around me extreme opposition, politically, socially, in the religion that I was born to, Catholicism, and nothing seemed to sum it up like this term that explains extreme opposition. So Heraclitus, he's sometimes called like the Buddha of ancient Greece. And I didn't know that at the time. Now I'm a Buddhist, so it makes sense that I was attracted to Heraclitus way back when. But it means to run in opposite and to run in opposite ways. And I knew that I wanted to make something that was abstract mostly and that used black and white in positive and negative space. And primarily why I was interested in the form of black and white was because I was working, my first internship in school was with a shadow theater company. And I was the editor of the company Reel. And I spent a lot of time archiving the work that was made by the company. And the work had a lot of puppets. So they're doing shadow puppetry. So I saw a lot of like humanoid mouths that were articulated and kind of wobbly moving joints, telling these narrative stories with a lot of dialogue. I definitely did not want to do that. But what I did love was what I saw when I was backstage making these and all the like weird shadows that happened on like corners and on the floor and on the ceilings and how all these things were kind of merging together in different forms. And shadow theater has many different paths that it's come from ancient Greece to China to Indonesia. And one place is France. So Le Chat Noir, Gabe, right here. I just laugh about this. So a lot of people have this poster in their kitchen or their bathroom, and they have no idea where it comes from. So the Le Chat Noir was a very famous French salon tavern in the like 1890s. It had the bourgeoisie and bohemians, artists and writers hanging out, drinking, talking. It was sort of the beginning of the modern day nightclub. But they were there often to watch shadow plays. So buried in the walls were these screens, and behind it, people were performing cinematic shadow theater. I was also loved this, and I've always wanted to kind of recreate this. So I knew I was going to do shadows, but I was mostly intrigued by experimental film. So I'm from Western New York, but I spent almost all of my life growing up in Los Angeles, hence the accent. And in LA, most of my friends' parents were producers. I spent a lot of time on set. I worked as an extra for TV and films in the summers of high school, but never had I seen an experimental film in that entire time. So when I moved to San Francisco and was living in the Mission District, right around the corner from Artist Television Access, I saw many experimental films. What I remember most was Martha Colburn, who I show in a lot of my classes. showing shapes and dots and cutouts of Bambi and blood and all kinds of crazy punk rock things in her collage art. And in the corner there, that's from Eric Sachs, I started to work with him. And he would ask me to take a piece of like plastic acetate and rub it on the floor and get it really nice and dirty, and then hold it up against the lens to move it around and make grain against the film. Sometimes I set up lights that would just kind of spot off intermittently to create like whiteouts in the film. And I'd never seen anything like this. I was kind of an undergrad. I don't know how many of you had seen experimental films prior to being here, but it was really new to me and I loved every bit of it. So as I started to make enantiodromia, I was also thinking about the design. So I wanted to use, I had a friend at the time who was a mathematician, and all these different parts of your life like wind up weaving their way into your work. So my friend had just gotten his PhD from Berkeley at 21 in math. So he was totally brilliant. And I said, hey, do you think that you can take a conceptual idea and turn it into a math equation? And he was like, try me. So I gave him, the spiel on enantiodromia, and he said, well, that's an easy one because that's the Mobius strip. So a Mobius strip is the shape, and you can find yourself at like one part of this ribbon, and you trace all the way around it, and you'll come to exactly where you started, but the opposite. And this was exactly what I was making, but I didn't like the way Mobius strips looked in shadow. So I graphed it and I put it into, there was like a boat in one of the scenes. I also used the barcode to make these masks. And the mask was worn by the primary dancer, and it kind of symbolized what I was going through with that very heavy, heavy head. So, and barcodes especially, because San Francisco is like this hotbed of progressive politics, radical politics, maybe not so radical now, but it was radical then. So reading Noam Chomsky and feeling like my whole life was a commodity, that people were there just to tax my birth to my death, was heavy on my head. And a barcode was the perfect representation of this. So Leah Barlow danced kind of through these lines. I don't have a lot of video from it because it's on mini DVDs. But you can get the picture. And then I had a friend in town who was a Japanese Buto dancer. And he didn't do Buto, but he had these really like sharp, exacting movements. And with her kind of languid ways of coming and going and falling off balance, it was a really good another opposition in the movement patterns. So he came up to her and beheads her at one point and kind of sets her free. And that was an Antiodromia. It premiered at Counterpulse, and people really liked it. And I know when I see you hear from your peers who love your work, how much this means to you, right, as an artist. So to take it out of school and to have people respond, it was really a wonderful feeling. So my next piece was at art school, because I think after Enantiodromia, I decided I wanted to get my MFA. And so I went to CalArts and created Ground to Cloud. And luckily, this was performed many times after grad school as well. So Ground to Cloud, the performers, composer, and myself worked together, building the performance up from improvised movements and associated research in pursuit of the answer to the core question: who are the gods of this art? The ancient form, the electricity that fuels it, the masculine and feminine principles, the historical Western mythologies of scientific discovery and religious folklore. And this question, who are the gods of my art, entered my mind because I had spent some time in Indonesia studying wayang kulit. So this is a form of traditional shadow theater. Too bright in here? Is this good? Should go a little lower. Traditional shadow theater in Bali, where they use the stories of the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, which are religious stories, and then hundreds of puppets to tell the stories. Sometimes the stories can last all night. What I particularly loved and wanted to bring into my work was the form. So sometimes you can watch from the front and see the shadows and fall into the mystery of these stories. Or you can walk around to the other side and watch the dalang, basically he's the puppet priest, and see him and the coconut oil flame and the attendants passing these puppets and telling these stories throughout the night. And I love that. I wanted to make a shadow play where you could see, like I had for so many years, the backstage, the best parts. And here's some nerdy pictures of me in Bali for Olivia to make fun of me. Um, and these are some puppets that I made. So when I say made, I didn't have any scissors. We had to actually use chisels and water buffalo hide, like the hide of an animal, and cut these out and then chisel all the little perforations to make the holes and then paint the flying pigfish. And that's one of my stories that I will not tell today, but it's a very cute story. And the other side, this is Pakwija. He's one of really the most famous puppeteers in all of Bali. He's like puppet rock star. And he makes these gorgeous puppets with all kinds of moving parts. He's unbelievable. Back in San Francisco, I was still performing Wayangkulit, assisting again. The first Westerner, Larry, who's my mentor, went to Indonesia and learned the whole repertoire. And this is a lot because you have to sing in Kawi, a form of Sanskrit, because the god puppets only sing and speak in Kawi. Then Balinese itself has a low, middle, and high. And then there's also Indonesian, the conqueror's language, and then you're also maybe translating into English. So it's pretty remarkable that an American learned this. So I would often assist him with these shows. And when you assist, you can sit on the Padawa side, which are the like good puppets, the heroes, or there's like the bad side, the Karawa puppets, and they're like the demon cousins. And I always felt pretty stoked that I got to sit on the Pandawa side. But back to Ground to Cloud, offerings. All of the shows were offered to the gods. The dances, the woodwork, all the sculpture, everything that everyone made in Bali was devotional to the gods. 3 times a day, people made offerings for me. So the gods would be wouldn't get mad at me, making little flower offerings and leaving them outside my door for me, which was so kind. Oh, and also to say, back in Buffalo, I've still been assisting puppet shows. We're lucky. I'm on the board of Nusantara Arts, where here at the AKG, we did a Javanese, pretty close puppet show. So if you want to see Balinese Shadow Theater, it's possible. Okay, so I answered this question for myself. Who are the gods of my art? And my answer was electricity, because I couldn't make anything with shadows without it. I can't use fire. I probably would try, but it's illegal. So in doing this, I had to mine the data. What's electricity? Who are the people involved in electricity? What are all the images? So I looked at the cultural mythology and where it met the technological history. So analog, glitch filled, nonlinear, kinetic, all the parts that could like form this experience. So we see the um, equation for power. This is Saint Barbara, the Catholic saint of lightning and fire. Nikola Tesla, who's pretty popular in this area. Ben Franklin, and electric shock therapy. This is a scene from that. And lightning itself, which I always thought came down from the heavens, like God created lightning, but it's not really the case. And that's why I called it ground to cloud. Most lightning is formed from the energy on the ground and shot upward into the sky. And there's just sort of an illusion that it comes from above. So I started making this, and this is new. Like I'd never seen anyone do what I was doing. Like I just started like taking a bunch of things and telling stories with no words, with no script. Totally experimental, which is I think easier in film because you're sitting by yourself and you're cutting things up. You're editing usually the films by yourself. But I was editing live with a group of people and a light board. And I would just each night sort of think of the story. Lightning touches down, I would tell my crew, and a man digs through tall grasses. He reaches to where the lightning struck the ground and pulls up a light bulb. And then we would just act it out on these screens in front of shadows. And I sort of got what I wanted. I wasn't able to make this in a place where people could walk around and see both sides, but I still got the same function of why uncool it by putting all of the stuff, the lights, the props, the sets over to the side. So the audience sat kind of here and they looked out at the triptych of screens, and the puppetry and the items were over to their left. So they could see the actors and how everything was being made, or they could just look and take in the full shadows. And this is my baby. This is my little light board. It's like, this is how I'm like a light DJ. So I'll sometimes have up to 10, 12 lights. People are moving them handheld. Some of them are stationary. And I'm sitting in the back of the audience sometimes, just cross dissolving. So I'm popping through different lights. I'm holding a long cross dissolve, and I'm doing all of this on my little light board, which I love. And so these are the images of how the first show turned out. I kind of want to tell you the story so I can set up the video, but you'll figure it out. But basically, let me say this. I was working with male and female principals. So the Ben Franklin character is logical. He's analytical. He's holding the light bulb always, like his movements come from his head. He's moving in a very staccato kind of way. So I'm choreographing his movements to be all in his head, to be very male, not in the gendered way, but in the more principled way, as in like a yin yang. Also in electricity, we have like male and female receptors. So talking about male and female in this way just kind of works. And then Barbara, so she was taken from Saint Barbara, the patron saint. And this is a gory story that only Catholics could make up, where Saint Barbara, she believed in Christ. So her pagan father locked her up in a tower. And when she prayed to God to release her, she was, magically, miraculously released into the forest, but her father found her and strangled her to death. And in my story, at the moment that he strangles her, he's also killed by the lightning, and she gives birth to a child that these women in the forest raise. Again, there's no words, so like this is all just sort of like all symbolic. And they raise her, and she's very much one with nature and the intuitive female receptive side. At some point, when she wanders into the city and is cut off from nature, she is taken by these people, maybe into an asylum, and given electric shock therapy. Then she removes this cord from her back. Maybe it's her kundalini, it's her power. And through this sort of, again, symbolic dance, she's magnetized toward the male element, which is Ben with the light bulb. And when they put the two things together, they're whole. That's when the two beings come together and have wholeness. So this is kind of how it played out in the video. Or in the live, none of it's video, it's all live. Yay, the light bulb stays on. For my next work was 4 trains, and let's see. For Four Trains, I continued to construct live experimental film experience from shadows, stands, computers, or projectors, and this time exploring 19th century American industrialization through the eyes of a young couple. I don't know why I'm always drawn to like melodrama. And while the nation is forging full steam into an unknowable future, the notions of time and toil are changing. The rail lines fuel an expansive transformation of the collective imagination. And at this point, I was starting to receive artist management and people who were presenting the work. And they wanted to know, how do I describe this? They kept describing it as Balinese shadow theater. And my mentor was mad. He was like, you don't do Balinese shadow theater. I do Balinese, I went to Bali. So, and there aren't any humanoid puppets. It was really hard to know what to do. So, and able to look back at some of the work that you've made, I kept saying it's like a mashup of Guy Madden and Lot Reiniger. In my dreams, maybe, but I always wanted to cut really fast, like Guy Madden does in Heart of the World and some of his films. But it's really hard to have really fast-paced cutting when you're cutting between people having to move props and be in the way and set up the shots really live. But I was using a lot of bright colors, and there's definitely a Lot Reiniger vibe in there as well. But the story for Four Trains, it first came when I was working at Pixar. So I was working at Pixar teaching shadow animation. And in Emeryville, I was stopped at the light for the train. And these red lights were flashing, and the train was going by, and it was casting this beautiful shadow on the building behind it. And I just looked at it and said, oh my God, like I want to make something with trains. This is so beautiful. And that's all it took. So I went to the flea market the next weekend. I bought a bunch of model trains, brought them back to my studio, set a bunch of lights on the floor, and had the trains moving around in circles all around me. And that would have been enough for me. But I still had to find a story to go with it. And Kalpana spoke about this in her talk, The Machine in the Garden. And yeah, this book was there for me. I was interested in like the discussion between man and nature, the transformation of the worker into commodity, which kind of harkens back to Enantiodromia, and how the worker's work takes on more of a mechanical meaning with no relationship to his purpose. And I was also reading Rebecca Solnit. Before she was popular for mansplaining, she wrote this book, Luke, about about Muybridge. And you guys know about Muybridge, right? Right. Yeah, I've seen some head nods. Good. So his photographic studies of motion are how we got to motion pictures and film today. I also think it's interesting that he is from San Francisco, and so is Rebecca Solnit, and everything felt very based in San Francisco for me at that time, and so did this story in some ways. So she uses this his life as a lens to talk about different technological advances throughout the time. But the train had this very ugly world attached to it. Like I always look at the train and think like innovation and it's incredible and this like pastoral sense of life and Americana. But it's really where a lot of mass destruction happened. In the book, she describes men leaning out of the train with guns and just shooting every bear and every live animal like in their sight. And that was sort of how they like cleared the land. It's terrible. And so this is the story of Four Trains. It's an expressionist story set in the past, explores modern relevance of living with dignity in a rapidly changing world in which one feels little control over external events. And so I populated the same kind of animus, male-female characters here, where she's very much connected to nature. And he, as this protector, they wake up one day and their lean-to is surrounded by a fence. And back in the day, these people were able to homestead, and if you stayed on land long enough, you kind of could live there, and that was your home. And this was sort of very much interrupted for these people when the train came and people were buying up parcels and building towns. And I was feeling a sense of displacement in a very different way, but I felt connected. And the displacement was coming from Google taking over the entire city block that housed my art space. And Cell Space, we now call it the legendary Cell Space, was a learning lab, 10,000 square foot warehouse in the heart of San Francisco's Mission District. And it was a place where you could do absolutely anything. My good friend, Jonathan, was living above, this all was a t-shirt factory. And he was living in an apartment that had a little window that looked out over this giant t-shirt factory. And every day when he was in his bathroom, probably going pee, he would look out into the warehouse and think, wow, what if I could turn this into an art space someday? And some point, the t-shirt factory went out of business. He went to his landlord and said, you know, would you rent it to me? Would you lease it to me? And he said, sure, if you have the money. So Jonathan called all of his friends, people from high school, friends' parents. They had a big old party. He's like, yes, we're going to do this. And at the end of the night, the end of the party, he's like, yes, we've raised enough money for the first month's rent. It wasn't a lot. But with all those people gathered, they found other ways to support it. And because it was also the height of like the San Francisco rave scene, basically they were able to throw rave parties at night that paid for the space to be a community arts warehouse by day. And let's see, there was a metal shop, wood shop, sewing shop, puppetry loft, full kitchen. Cell Space hosted roller derbies, hip hop shows, hoopers, like professional hula hoopers, slam poets, b-boys, b-girls, and b-peoples, and all kinds of circus arts. And I mean, you could absolutely do anything there. One time I said, hey, let's have a fort building slumber party. And we built forts all through Spell Space and had a giant slumber party. And I made a slasher film in the middle of it. And like, you know, if you ever wonder what should I do with my life, find a big giant art space and figure out how to rent it with your friends. That's the best thing you could do with your life. And this just shows some of the things. There were murals outside. Anyone could paint. Anyone could tag. And we did a lot of puppetry. And I was with this like that shadow theater company was really snobby about shadow puppetry. Larry had like the corner of the market of like, this is what's culturally important for puppets. So it was really good for me to like go down with my friends and learn about all different forms of puppetry. There's a huge resurgence of avant-garde and experimental puppetry in America. You should definitely check it out. Humanettes. This is Jonathan as a little humanette. We even created a traveling puppet troupe called the Big To Do Puppet Crew. Our most famous show is the Hemp Show, where we taught people the difference between hemp and marijuana. We were funded by Woody Harrelson, not a lie. I was even able to do ground to cloud at Cell Space before it was completely disseminated. But now this exists, and that's important. Anyway, so back to Four Trains. So I started populating like my mood boards with all the images for the design. So greedy robber barons and timetables and deforestation. And here's a little clip from the beginning. And this time I still wanted that Balinese functionality. So I put some things in the front. It was always important to show people that this is not a film and it's not a projection, that it's actually happening live. Here we go. Okay, and that was the beginning dream sequence. That kind of, yay, thank you. Ooh, I'm missing another clip. I did have a clip of the backstage. I don't want to go into the ugly land of YouTube. We'll just leave it at that. We'll leave it at that for now. You can always look at the website. Okay, and then another work that I made back in grad school is shadows in stereo. So I had a double major in grad school. So one was experimental theater, where I was making ground to cloud, and the other was integrated media, where I was making installation work. And I've always knew that I would get to CalArts, and all I ever wanted to do was make 3D shadows. So I'd never seen a 3D shadow. To this day, I've never seen a 3D shadow made by anybody other than myself. But I heard that they exist, and some other people have told me they've seen some, but they're the most spectacular thing in the entire world. And this is my first installation with my dean, Eric N. And it went over really well. People loved it. And people love to play with their 3D shadows. And let me just tell you a little bit. I'll go into that. What your 3D shadow is I'll do it at UB soon. I just need a gallery space. You wear red and blue 3D glasses. Olivia and people in my video 2 class, I did show them. And you have a light, a stereoscope. They're called shadowgrams, and we're kind of used to seeing these kinds of stereoscopic shadowgrams. With the 2 different lights and two different colored lights that are making an offset shadow of red and blue, and when you're wearing blue and red over your eyes, it trips your eyes into experiencing depth. But it's not just that like little bit of depth, like when you wear some weird glasses and you're like, oh, it's kind of 3D, No, it's super, super, super 3D. Like adults like duck during my shows. It comes right into your periphery, and there's inherent motion tracking. So no matter where you're sitting, you see an object right in front of you. But what's most fun is when you get to see your own 3D shadow. Let me see a little bit more about this. Okay, that's it. It's this incredible also sense of somatic dislocation, because we think that we're here and then we see this body of light that is our double coming at us. Yeah, you got to see it to believe it. And I was very fortunate that my neighbor was a 3D, Rayzone has passed away, was a 3D expert. So he didn't really teach me anything about the 3D that I was creating, but he gave me the like bona fide stamp of approval that I was like making the biggest 3D shadows he'd ever seen, 40 feet. I want to be in the Guinness Book of World Records. Sorry. Okay, I'll tone it down. So Rayzone also took me to meet all kinds of special effects artists. And it's been a great life when you make something cool and fun that people like. I get to meet other people who make special effects in films, and they kind of consider me like part of their crew, which is very wonderful. I got to do shadows in stereo at Cell Space in a very messy, cacophonous way. And then shadows in stereo started to have this other life because people liked it out in public and in public art spaces. And this was sort of new to me, to take the work out and have people play, and to sort of think about play as an important aspect of the work, and how I would direct audience travel paths. So I wanted to start working with automation and how I might incentivize their movement into the Z-axis. You can kind of just like go out there and dance in front of it, which I'll show you many people do. But if there's a way that I can sort of get people to do the things that really make it work well, that's something that I'm still working toward, the perfect shadows in stereo installation. Here's just some fun clips for the heck of it. There was a a dance conference in LA. So I put this up at Grand Stages. Super fun. And oh my God, this guy is incredible. I don't know where the sound is. Oh well, it's better with sound. But yeah, everybody loves to dance with their shadow. Nobody loves it more than me. All right, maybe someday I'll bring this to the DMS club party. So yes, many immersive installations followed with 3D. And then I got the call that was probably the number one call I ever wanted in my life, where someone said, I have a 40-foot art gallery in San Francisco. Would you like to come and do anything that you want there? And I said, hell yeah. So the McEvoy Foundation sponsored this exploration for me. And what I really wanted to do was to be there with dancers and movers and work with the stereoscope or the shadowgram and figure out what are the most captivating ways to create intimacy with the movements. What is the best form of dance? What is the right pace? What are the right objects? How do I work with this medium that I reinvented? And so I went to the most obvious. I went to Avatar, um, partially because somebody in the lobby of REDCAT got me saying this and put it in the LA Times. I'm way ahead of James Cameron. It's just the things you say when you're hanging out. It's kind of true because James Cameron has to like put like a bunch of rendering devices that take hours and days to render out his films. I can make 3D instantaneously that makes people duck. I like Avatar, but I've never actually like ducked. Like, no. So I thought of using Avatar as sort of the impetus for our movement exploration. So I made a score based on like watching the film many times and thinking about like object or craft enters screen left, moves into the Z-axis, like enters above frame. And so I had this like really detailed, cool, artsy score, and I brought it into the dancers, and they kind of did it for a little while, and then they were like, "We're not doing this." And this is some video of our exploration at McEvoy Foundation. And next we performed it for an audience. And I won't show very much of this, but as I was watching this, again, it had no kind of conceptual bones. It was just an experiment with form. And as I was watching it, I thought, oh, I'm seeing mostly female forms, and I'm thinking about flatness moving into dimensionality. And I thought, oh, this might work if I further explore visual pleasure in narrative cinema. And so I was thinking about Laura Mulvey. How many of you have read that essay? Yeah, a lot of you have, I'm sure. And I wasn't really going to do like a interpretive dance of this essay, but I wanted to sort of think about some main components and put it into practice. So I never got to fully dive into that because we made a work in progress and the work in progress started to show. And basically, the performance of antiquated augmented reality looks at the ability to transform the 2D shadow image into 3D, lending itself to a symbolic kinetic enactment of modern media's departure from the male gaze. A flat feminine form transforms into a fully dimensional one as she walks out of a television set. Combined with the Fordist notion of the feminine form as a mass-produced consumer good, the work sets up choreographed, repetitive motions that are broken by the ability to reach into the Z-axis to create gestures of intimacy. And again, started working with the dancers, talking to them about the concept and getting them to move mostly just the idea of flat to dimensional. And first off, it's really, really difficult for a dancer to dance in shadow just from the get. So a dancer usually wants to pull focus to themselves and move their body. And all of the people who work with me in any capacity, they're animating the shadow behind them. So they have to slow down. I always talk like it's Tai Chi time. If you move too fast, it's too fast and it blurs for the people. They can't really like take it all in. So everyone's moving a little bit slower, a little bit more deliberate. You can't move like too far out of the frame and have your head cut off from the screen. And then in 3D, there's this whole other element to it where you're actually moving toward people and their faces and their personal space. So the way that we would achieve this in rehearsals, the dancers would dance, and then I would like tap them out and dance their part and let them go into the audience and see how things were done. And at times I brought in Michaela Taylor, a really gifted choreographer. Again, it's really hard for me to find choreographers who are willing to take this challenge, or they come in. I've had to fire a lot of choreographers. They come in with a set choreography and they're not dancing to their actual dance partner, which is the stereoscope that they have to be dancing with. So it's quite a process. Um, but this is a clip from it. So we had many mood banks of the TV section, which you'll see a little bit in here. A woman kind of moving, doing a lot of like grotesque images of televangelists and people selling things on TV and kind of like working with big TV personality energy. And then she rips off the screen, and later you see the screens flying over the heads of the dancers. The basket we used kind of for the sense of womb space and this kind of feminine way of dancing for oneself. And here's how it goes. Yay, thanks. And I know it's frustrating not to really be seeing it in 3D, but you have to take my word for it. I was really excited to design my first 3D classes. And from that work, I don't know, this is my only brag. I got to go to Sundance and it was so cool. So what was so cool about this is that I never would have applied for Sundance because I hadn't actually made a film, but I was a video editor. I studied editing. That's really what I wanted to do, was to be a filmmaker. So when we performed Antiquated Augmented Reality, and the presenter from Sundance came up to me and said, "Oh, make sure you apply." I was like, "What?" So we applied, and I was the first ever non-digital, non-film in the Sundance Film Festival. And I thought, oh, they're gonna put us in some like novelty act, like out in the like boonies. But we were in the Egyptian theater, which I think is the best theater in Sundance. And Arte Tracks, they only covered 2 artists, this French TV show about art, and we were one of them. So it was really a wonderful experience to be able to be there with so many filmmakers that I love, to meet Robert Redford, and to show this form. And I think people are interested in the form primarily because it's a conversation between modern day AR and VR, and this form that dates back to the 19th century, and how they are very much related to one another. I'm going to show a little bit of this testimonial, just a tiny bit, just because you can't see it in 3D, and I want you to know that it really works. Show a little bit of this.
It was totally mind-blowing. Totally mind-blowing. The hands reaching out to you just like felt like they were coming into your soul. It was just totally beautiful. I would recommend it to anybody.
So I used to be a ballet dancer, and I would have to say that the one thing I think the artist achieved most in doing this was creating some sort of connection with the audience and the dancer that I always wished I could do during ballet. Like suddenly being able to extend an arm over the audience, or your head over the audience, makes them part of what you're doing instead of them just wishing they could be on stage with you. So that's really genius as far as I'm concerned.
I thoroughly enjoyed it. I did not know what to expect when I saw it. The idea of 3D glasses with just 3 dancers standing on stage, I just didn't know what to expect. The minute it started, I was just like, whoa. It was like the extension to everything, and just it was. I didn't think you can do much with paper and light and shadow. It was cool. It was so cool. I enjoyed it so much.
All right. Thank you, Luke. And it continues. Every time we're asked to perform, it's really lovely, but I really need to just sit down and choreograph another 40 minutes of it because it's too short. And this was LACMA. Can't say no to Michael Geffen. So we keep getting asked to perform it over and over again. But like I said, I really kind of want to go back to the drawing board with it again. I never graduate from any of my shows. I wish I could just keep making the same shows over and over and over again. Okay. And then 3D. So the only way that I can actually disseminate this, so people have to be there live to see it, or they can watch it in a VR headset, which I find just ridiculous. And when you watch it in a VR headset, you have to still be wearing the red and blue glasses. So that's kind of what got me more and more into VR. and trying to figure out ways to work it in AR as well. So these are like early experiments that we have that I'll probably start experimenting with this in Buffalo soon. All right. And so the wonderful thing about being at a research university is that I can do some research. So this week I'll be giving a talk about the beginning of this research, which will be further exploring, ways in which traditional art forms can be reimagined and revitalized in the digital age. And special effects, the Mars rover is using red and blue anaglyph. So all the different ways that I can sort of think about and find the correlation of how people are seeing and perceiving the 3D shadow in an analog environment, and then measuring how they're seeing it with the digital, with the headset and the depth map. So that's sort of the correlation that I'm probably work on it this summer to figure out. Then there's a bunch of fun stuff that I've done that I'm not going to talk about, like Pee Wee Herman and Exploratorium and Halloween shows at REDCAT. And I've designed so many freaking theater shows. I hope I never design for theater again. Music videos, concerts, VR for the residents, transhumanism in Dusseldorf. Lots of fun things with shadows. I really only like doing my own shows, but I do learn a lot and I get to have fun when I collaborate. This one was cool though, and I just wanted to show this one because the artist Jordan Wolfson called me up and took me to lunch and asked me if I would teach a robot how to make hand shadow puppets. So I was like, sure. So that was a really fun gig. And I mean, this robot and these amazing roboticists and us sitting up there with like hands trying to make faces was fun. So the last work I'm going to show you is something that it's still kind of new to me, which is the sense of wonder. So I've been sitting with this project for years and I still don't exactly know what to do with it, but I'm so inspired by Rachel Carson. How many people know who Rachel Carson is? And this is exactly why I want to do this. So Rachel Carson has contributed more than any other person to awakening the modern environmental movement. Her 1962 book, Silent Spring, was published 18 months before her life was cut short. And it led to the creation of Earth Day and the founding of the US Environmental Protection Agency. And she sparked the environmental movement as we know it today. And it pains me that people don't know about Rachel Carson. And other cool things about her, she was also queer. She never married. She was the primary breadwinner of her family, providing for her mother, her sister, and her nephew. And she wrote the most beautiful book that I love more than anything, which is The Sense of Wonder. And this book encourages people to go out with children. And she's really good about making a point that you don't have to be parents. And I don't have kids, and I love hanging out with my friends' kids. So for an author to kind of like, notice that and talk about going out with children and not taking them out on sunny, beautiful days, but taking them out in the rain, taking them out in the mud. If you're not privileged to have a lot of nature around you, that you can look up at the sky, that there's always some way that we can connect to nature. And let's see. So one way that I've sort of just getting into the work has been throwing garden parties. And this garden party came happy accident. I was about to go to a studio with dancers and lights and all my stuff and figure out how to make a play about Rachel Carson when they canceled. We're still in COVID times. And I had to water the garden and everything in the garden was like, oh, I'm a shadow surface. And so we cast shadows on the house. Oh no, it didn't show as much as I wanted it to. Onto the house, onto screens that I put on the trampoline. Oops. I had a bunch of overhead projectors that I love. We read parts of the book. We read love letters between Rachel and her girlfriend Dorothy. Throughout the night, I used a lot of mirrors and optical objects to play with water the garden that was growing right in front of us, we made amazing shadows of the plants around us. And I thought this is something I definitely want to do more at local gardens and different places, at people's homes. I kind of get tired of performing in venues. It's nice just to go outside and make a show. And so these are some of the images of what we created on the house. And all of the images were photographs that I took in the garden or at Muir Beach. And this is the ugliest slide in my presentation, but I wanted to show this because this is kind of the culmination, if you can kind of see it, of what I think the Rachel Carson project will be about. And so I want to make a four-sided cube of shadow screens, and people will sit inside the cube either on bean bags or maybe swivel chairs, so you can look around you. And using reel-to-reel projector lights and overheads, my most favorite obsolete technologies that I am pained that these things, I mean, Elmo projectors that I use all the time, I can't get. The light bulbs that I use in my art, they're extinct. Like I have to like pay big money for them now. And colored gels that I use in everything, no longer around because of LED lights. They're still around, but they're not being manufactured in the same way. So I want to kind of create with the obsolete technologies, all these like beautiful moments of nature and seascapes and landscapes, and then have some ugly ass hot projectors with their super high lumens kind of blind all of these beautiful scenes with, you know, dust storms and fires and blazing sun and all the different things that are coming at us from the climate catastrophe. So it's kind of recursive to my life and is a way to play with all my favorite obsolete media and to talk about my own career where I have so many times walk in to do shadows or my art and it's blinded by the video designer or somebody with too hot of a light. So this is something I'm still working on. So I'm going to close with this quote. It's a little long from Rachel, and then I have one little funny thing at the very end. So, and this is why, just to show you why I love this book so much. What is the value of preserving and strengthening this sense of awe and wonder, this recognition of something beyond the boundaries of human existence? Is the exploration of the natural world just a pleasant way to pass the golden hours of childhood, or is there something deeper? I am sure there is something much deeper, something lasting and significant. Those who dwell as scientists or laymen among the beauties and mysteries of the earth are never alone or weary in life. Whatever the vexations or concerns of their personal lives, their thoughts can find paths that lead to inner contentment or renewed excitement for living. Those who contemplate the beauty of the earth find reserves of strength that will endure as long as life lasts. Yeah. And here's a kid loving shadows as much as I do. Wait, where's the music? It's so much better with the music, though. Nikki, why isn't the music playing? Okay, well, we will end in silence. Thank you, guys.